Howdy folks, OgreVI here, and this is a response to Ogre6 and his tag, what are some clues that somebody might be a dickhead? So, it's been a couple of weeks I think since I got this tag, and I apologize for the delay. I've been a very busy sort, but in thinking about this, the first person that came to mind was a fella that I met in Reno. This was back in 2005, and I think in the summer of 2005 when I was driving long-haul truck across the country, and I was stuck in Reno on probably a Sunday morning getting a tire changed out. So I pulled off and got a tire fixed, and while the fellow was out there changing the tire on the trailer, this dude walked up, and he was just this loudmouth bigot of a fella. He started in and he started talking about, I'm trying to remember the conversation, but he started in on the topic of, you look like a working fella and a nice white kid, and then he went on and on about Reno hates niggers, and there's a lot of Mexicans in this town and even they hate the niggers, and just all this other shit. He was just going crazy with this stuff, and just seeing me on the street, he just decided that I was going to be a great conversationalist for this line of conversation. I'm not sure how he came to that decision, but he did. And what I remember taking away from that conversation was, gosh, this guy is a real dickhead. So I think he qualifies. So loudmouth bigots. However, there are two other categories of people, or rather two other actions that will generally clue me in that someone is a dickhead, that are sort of derivative of that, and that is either being loudmouthed or being a bigot, or being loudmouthed and a bigot, which may be a different thing than being a loudmouth bigot. I will explain. So I was riding the bus to work one day. I don't ride the bus to work anymore, but I did for a while when I worked in Seattle, and I was riding the bus to work, and or maybe home from work, and there was this young black kid sitting on the bus listening to his headphones. Wasn't listening to him very loud, just minding his own business. And there were these two middle-aged white kind of clucking hens sitting over to the side, being very loudmouthed, having some loudmouth conversation about some shit. And I remember their screeching voices were just grating over my ears. And then, because the kid had turned his music up to the point where you could almost hear the treble squeak out of his earphones, one of the ladies turns to him and says, "Would you please turn that down?" in this very condescending voice, very mean voice. And the thing is, he wasn't the only kid on the bus that had a pair of headphones, and he wasn't the only person on the bus making noise. He just happened to be the only black kid on the bus. And in that moment, this wave of awkwardness just sort of passed through the bus. And I remember thinking, gosh, these ladies suck. So if you're a loudmouth and then you turn around and be a bigot, you don't have to be a loudmouth bigot in order to be a bigot or a loudmouth, and in either case you're a dickhead. There's one set of behaviors that I don't see very often in my line of work anymore, thankfully, but it still does come up every now and again. And I don't know if there is a word or there are simple words to describe it, but it's when someone when someone surrounds themselves with people who fear them and jockey for position around them to the point of perhaps even bullying others. So this has happened to me at work before, where I've had to work with other teams or other groups where the middle management, say, is a dickhead, and he turns out to have such an effect on his reports, on his employees, that they then, in his presence and only in his presence, treat me like they need to boss me around in order to put on a good show for their boss. So when otherwise good people are cowed into this kind of pack animal behavior by someone, that person is probably a dickhead. I've seen that a couple of times out in my working environments, various places that I've worked. Outside of the professions, I'm going to go with some stuff that's not really going to surprise anybody if you know me at all, but vegan zealots and anti-smokers. So I don't mind if you're vegan, and I don't mind if you're a non-smoker. Those are obviously lifestyle choices. whatever, it's not really any of my business. But when you make it my business by rubbing my face in it or getting all sanctimonious on me, now I don't like it when people get all sanctimonious on me to begin with. And I generally think that people who get sanctimonious are kind of dickheads. But in particular, I think the vegan thing just kind of gets my goat. I think everybody is rubbed raw by a different kind of thing, and veganism is just the one for me. Just something about it I just find enormously irritating when people decide to parade it in front of my face and get sanctimonious on me and try to act as if they're superior to, better than I am, simply for the fact of this life choice. Now, contrast that with many of the Hindu folks that maybe you guys know out there. I've certainly known quite a few Hindu folks out there, working as I do in on the east side of Lake Washington in the Puget Sound area of Washington State at various software companies. So I've known a lot of folks who were raised vegetarian or even vegan. I guess you would qualify it as vegan. And that's just how they eat. It's just a part of their lifestyle. They don't make a big deal out of it. They certainly don't make a fuss. You go out to lunch with them, they find things they can eat, or they'll take you out to an Indian place and I find things I can eat. It's just not that big of a deal. But when someone's up their own ass about it, well, it's the same as when someone's up their own ass about anything. So there you go. That one just irritates the shit out of me. And then the anti-smoker thing, well, that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone either. Not that I think that smoking is the most healthy thing that a person can do, but I think that a lot of the backlash against smokers is a bit overblown. When you criticize me for polluting the air with my cigarettes and then you drive off in an SUV, I think that we've got something backwards here. So I'm really not feeling a great deal of sympathy for the anti-smokers and the pollution of their air. Go fuck yourselves. Just get fucked. That's all. Fuck off. Gossip. I cannot stand gossip. I loathe gossip. I just detest it. And I think that engaging in the act of gossip is a sure sign that you're probably kind of a dickhead. Now, everybody has their moments, and there is such a thing as talking about something that somebody else has been through or relating a story without it turning into gossip. But it's a bit of a fine line, and while we all have moments where we overstep those lines, if you're the kind of person who just treads over that line indiscriminately, who just doesn't care one way or the other whether you are perceived as a gossip, because gossiping is in fact what you do and how you enjoy your time, I got no time for you. It's not worth the risk. Ultimately, it'll result in a telephone game that only hurts me when I become the subject of that gossip and I become the subject of a rumor. It's dangerous, and I want nothing to do with it. And willful ignorance, another one that should surprise absolutely no one. I don't have a problem with ignorance per se. Ignorance simply is a state of being, and it can be remedied by research, by learning. Nothing wrong with ignorance as such. But willful ignorance, that sort of attitude that says that you know what you need to know and you don't need to know anything else in order to get by, and therefore all of your decisions are the right ones about every possible topic, and you know everything you need to know about everything, even though you don't know anything about anything. I just can't stand it. That sort of willful ignorance just really irritates the shit out of me. And I have actually been known to fuck with people who are willfully ignorant in some kind of mean and nasty ways, and I'm not proud. Maybe I am. I don't know, but certainly I think that. Now I'm not a cruel person, and cruelty is another one of mine. Actually, I'm very much opposed to cruelty. I don't think that people should be cruel to each other as a rule. Certainly not if you haven't done anything to deserve it. But I do think that there's some amount of fun to be had at the expense of people who are willfully ignorant. So there you have mine. I know I come off a bit like a churlish and histrionic ass in a video like this where we're talking about what makes somebody a dickhead. It's not really a subject that I like to discuss at great length because, well, I don't really like to have a bad word for other folks, at least not when it's not directly to their face. So, I don't know, I'm waffling about this video, I guess, but here you have it. Here are the things that I might see in somebody else that might clue me in to think that they're a dickhead. Generally, though, I tend to give a pretty wide berth. I'm a fairly forgiving sort with folks, unless it's in traffic. If you're in traffic and you cut me off or you don't fucking merge right or whatever, fuck you. Fuck you. That's all. Take care. Good luck.